There aren't many American cities where you can stand in the middle of downtown and watch an entire river flow over a series of waterfalls, with a strange cable car flying above it. But that's basically Spokane, and I think it's epic. When I first looked around the city on Google Earth, this was what immediately caught my attention. You have a relatively dense downtown with a few high-rises, older buildings and bridges. Right next to it, the Spokane River splits around Canada Island and the Riverfront Park Peninsula. Here it drops through the Spokane Falls into a much deeper gorge. And honestly, I'd probably spend a lot of time here in summer. The park looks cute and waterfalls are always a fascinating sight. Further west, only a few minutes from downtown, the landscape drops into the valley around Latta Creek. You have the I-90 bridges and this long railroad viaduct crossing the valley. Here on Google Earth you also have this BNSF freight train climbing uphill, which looks like a little model railway, and I love it. So that made me wonder, why did Spokane develop here? Was it the railroad, the river, the waterfalls? Today we take a look at Spokane and try to explain why the city looks the way it does. This video is sponsored by my channel members and my patrons. Thank you guys all so much for your support throughout the years, I really appreciate it.
The waterfalls in downtown.
Let's start with Spokane Falls. Long before the modern city existed, the falls were an important gathering and fishing place for the Spokane people and other indigenous groups in the region. The European American settlement around the falls began in the early 1870s, and one of the first major developments was a water-powered sawmill. The river loses quite a bit of elevation here, so the flowing water could be used to power early industry. Mills developed along the river, followed later by hydroelectric generation. The Spokane River starts at Lake Coeur d'Alene in Idaho, flows west through the city and eventually reaches the Columbia River. And this whole river-lake network around East Washington looks wild, to say the least. If we look at historic images, the downtown riverfront used to look completely different. Today, much of it is Riverfront Park. Around a century ago, tracks, depots, warehouses and industrial buildings covered much of the land around the river and Havermale Island. Spokane had become one of the main railroad centers of the inland northwest, and it looked so different back then. Stuff like this is so fascinating to me, but as we can see, a lot has changed. Why? The city decided to host a World's Fair. Expo 74 opened in 1974 with an environmental theme. To prepare the site, rail yards were removed. Sections of the riverfront were cleaned up and the former transportation area became the fairgrounds. More than 5 million people visited, and Spokane was the smallest city at the time to host a World's Fair. Amazing stuff. After the event, much of the site became Riverfront Park. One of the main reminders of the old railroad district is the Great Northern Clock Tower. So the park we can see today came from a major change in how downtown Spokane used its riverfront.
The Railroad City.
The railroad story didn't disappear. Follow the tracks west toward Latta Creek and you find several bridges crossing the valley at different heights. There's the historic Latta Bridge, Interstate 90, and this very long rail viaduct that branches off in the west. And that railroad bridge is actually connected to the creation of Riverfront Park. In the early 1970s, Burlington Northern reorganized several rail routes through Spokane. A new bridge, around 4,000 feet long, was built high above Latta Creek. The route allowed trains to avoid some of the older tracks through the central city and helped free up railroad land around Havermale Island before Expo 74. So this bridge and the park downtown area are part of the same redevelopment story. Railroads had already been important to Spokane for almost a century. The Northern Pacific reached the area in the early 1880s and connected Spokane to a much larger network. Warehouses, lumber businesses and other industries developed around the tracks. Then, in 1889, a major fire destroyed around 32 blocks of downtown Spokane. Large parts of the center had to be rebuilt, and many of the brick and stone commercial buildings you see today came from the decades after the fire. Spokane also grew because it became a service and transportation center for the wider region. Mining was important nearby, along with timber, agriculture, and food processing. Today, healthcare and education are major employers, along with manufacturing, aerospace-related industries, and other services. The city itself has a little over 230,000 residents, but it serves a much larger part of eastern Washington and the inland Northwest. One local on Reddit described that balance quite well. I think the mid-size of Spokane has the best of both worlds. All or most amenities you could want and less traffic.
From downtown into nature.
And then there's the part of Spokane that is probably the best part. You don't have to travel very far before the city starts opening up. Follow the Spokane River west and you quickly reach forests, steep riverbanks and exposed basalt. One of the best examples is Riverside State Park in the Bowl and Pitcher area. And these are some huge ass rocks. Crazy stuff. Much of this landscape sits on Columbia River basalt, created by large lava flows millions of years ago. Later, Ice Age floods passed through eastern Washington and helped shape many of the valleys, cliffs, and exposed rock formations we see today. The city can look very green, especially neighborhoods with large ponderosa pines. But the landscape often looks much drier than western Washington around Seattle, for example. Spokane is on the eastern side of the Cascade Mountains, where the climate is less influenced by the Pacific. That gives the area a mix of pine forest, dry grass, exposed rock, and river valleys. And somehow I really love the look. Imagine living here. I would sit in front of the window instead in front of the PC the whole day. And there are trails where you can follow the river directly out of the city. The Spokane River Sentinel Trail runs for about 40 miles. It passes through downtown, follows large sections of the river and continues toward the Idaho state line. From there, trail connections continue toward Coeur d'Alene. So you can start beside the buildings and waterfalls downtown and fairly quickly reach quieter sections of river and forest. That connection to the outdoors also comes up when locals talk about living here. For example, Luna Puppy 88 wrote, I personally think Spokane is much better experienced outside. And when it does rain, it's not like it storms all day, it's usually pretty brief. And after looking around the city, I can see why outdoor access seems to be an important part of Spokane. You have a proper downtown, universities, hospitals and regional services, while the river and surrounding landscape are always nearby. And the same river that helped attract early industry is now one of the main public spaces of the city. The waterfalls helped power early Spokane, the railroads turned it into a regional center, and later the city removed many of those railroad facilities from the Riverfront and turned the area into a park. That combination explains a lot about Spokane today, but obviously we're only scratching the surface. So, if you live here, tell us what else we should know about the city, which places I completely missed and what it's actually like to live here. And I'll see you in the next city. If you enjoyed this video, you could think about becoming a channel member or supporting me on Patreon. Anyway, thanks for watching and servus.